Today, everyone starts school when they're 6 years old. That's the law. You have to go to school. It may not always be fun, but getting an education does give you a big advantage in life. But there was a time when not everyone had this advantage. In the early 1800s, there weren't many schools in Georgia. Most children were lucky if they learned to read and write and do simple arithmetic. And girls usually received much less education than boys. Let's find out why.
It is winter. The cold wind whistles through the branches of the... Do you know that word, Laura? It's Trees. Trees. They learn their lessons well today.
In the early 1800s, this is how some Georgia girls learned to read. They studied at home, taught by an older sister or their mother or a brother who went to school. But there were some girls who attended school. This was the time of the one-room schoolhouse, with only one classroom for all the students. 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, all in the same room. But girls usually quit after a few years.
Boys and girls were taught just about the same things. If they went to a one-room schoolhouse, they would be all learning reading, writing, and ciphering, or arithmetic, we would call it today. But boys would stay a little bit longer and learn more math, and girls would probably go home. But as soon as they had learned to read and write at a basic level, they would go back and understudy their mothers.
Girls left school to learn homemaking skills from their mothers, aunts, grandmothers. In those days, almost everything had to be made from scratch. Women had to weave cloth to make clothing. If they wanted a quilt for the bed to keep them warm, they had to make it themselves. If they wanted to light their homes at night, they had to make candles. And people grew much of their own food. Back then, keeping a home meant long hours of hard work.
Girls were supposed to stay at home, supposed to be the housekeepers, supposed to be the baby bearers. The career that was expected was motherhood and wifehood.
Wife and mother. There weren't any careers for Georgia women outside the home, so why should they get much education? Remember, this was long before women could even vote. But there was another reason that girls usually didn't get as much education as boys.
Many people sincerely believed that it would be detrimental to a woman's health if she was educated, that her brain would explode.
She would run a fever if she learned a hard subject. She would break out in green pimples. She would not be able to have babies. All of these kinds of things were myths that were spread about girls who had too much education.
There were people who believed that women who had too much education would neglect their homes and families. This seemed especially to worry men. If you were of African descent, it didn't matter if you were a man or a woman. You had almost no chance of going to school. Just about all black people in Georgia at that time were slaves, and whites were afraid that educating slaves would make them rise up against their owners.
Little by little, laws were passed so that black people, slaves particularly, would not be able to learn to read. It was illegal.
While attitudes toward educating blacks became more restrictive, ideas about educating women, at least white women, became more liberal. Women should be able to do more than sew and cook. They should be able to go to college if they wanted to. Men could attend the University of Georgia, which was chartered in 1785. So why not create a college for women?
In Macon, Georgia, there were very enlightened individuals and members of the Methodist Church who wanted to make available for women the same educational opportunities that were available for men.
So they gathered together, raised the money, started construction, established a board of trustees, and then petitioned the legislature for the charter for Wesleyan College, which was then called Georgia Female College. And this charter was granted December 23rd, 1836.
The idea of a college for women was radical, shocking to some people. there were men who refused to contribute to the building fund.
I will not give you a cent for any such object. I would not have one of your graduates for a wife, for I could never even build a pig pen without her criticizing it and saying it was not put up on mathematical principles.
I will not give $1. All a woman needs to know is how to read the New Testament and to spin and weave clothing for her family.
In spite of opposition, Georgia Female College, later called Wesleyan College, was built in downtown Macon.
Wesleyan was founded because back in the 1830s, men could go to college and get degrees in this country, but girls could not. They could go to schools where they could study, but they couldn't get a college degree like men could. And so the first college degree ever granted to a woman anywhere on planet Earth was given at Wesleyan College in 1840.
The first college anywhere for women. This was a radical idea for the time. But the first students were hardly feminists looking for a career. Most were daughters of wealthy plantation owners. They hoped that a good education would help them find a suitable husband. But don't misunderstand, that didn't mean the college allowed dating.
They could not date or see young men. Of course, dating in those days was not dating as we know it today. They could leave only with a member of the family, with permission of the president of the college. I mean, leave the campus at all, except to go to church or in the company of a faculty member, going to theater performances, or just for a walk. However, the campus had a tall iron fence around it. The iron posts were pretty far apart. So occasionally the young women would walk outside and the young men would walk down the street outside the gate. They couldn't speak, but they could look.
Over the years, ideas and styles changed. The hoop skirts disappeared a long time ago from the Wesleyan campus. And today's students are of different races, religions, and ethnic groups, and they come from families with all different levels of income.
Wesleyan has about 450 students. Though they basically come from the southeast, we also have students from New York to California and from Minnesota to Texas. Our first year class has 2 students from Japan and 1 from Chile. And 19% of the student body is represented by minority students.
Another change is that women students today are preparing for careers as doctors, lawyers, teachers, scientists. Half of Wesleyan students will go on to graduate school. Today, throughout Georgia, women make up 55% of college and university students. Still, Wesleyan was the first college for women, and the students here are proud of that.
So yeah, you do really feel a sense of history. You feel a sense of tradition and pride, and it's really nice. It's a nice feeling.
In 1820, there were only 40 schools in the entire state of Georgia.